Welcome to Fans of the Forge, where we're recapping this week, Season 5, Episode 10, the German Halberd. To my right, we have Chris.
What up?
And to my other right is Teresa.
Hello.
So, let's get into it. We have our 4 contestants this week. There's Ben, who has 9 years of part-time experience.
Wait, Ben or Vince?
Oh, yeah. Let's talk about that. He comes out. I swear he says his name is Vince, but the title is Ben. The judges refer to him as Ben. He's known as Ben, but I know what my ears heard, and I rewound it many times. He says Vince.
Yeah, as we did too.
Right.
We rewound it
So-
a number of times.
We're writing these notes, and I'm like, I have Vince crossed out, Ben.
Right.
And I asked Sean, I'm like, hey, what did yours say? He has Vince crossed out, and then Ben.
Yes.
Yeah.
I wrote something else too, and I just want to go back to it. I wrote Ben after I crossed out Vince. Real name is Vince, because there's no way his name isn't Vince. So anyway, there's that controversy right off the top, right? Right off the top. Then we have Phil, who has 50 years full-time experience.
Wow.
That's a lot, right? So he's my pick. That's Teresa's underdog.
Yes.
Was the underdog because he was so old?
I feel like we've been watching enough of these shows that the guy with the most experience doesn't always win. And so I thought he was like, I'm going with stats on that one.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. And then we have comic relief Doran. First name Doran, last name Doran, apparently, who has 6 years part-time experience. And that's your underdog,
Yep.
my underdog. And then we round out with Jonathan, who has 26 years of part-time experience. I thought about doing him as my underdog, but with that much experience, I couldn't put him as an underdog. That ended up being your pick and Teresa's pick.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, one note was when asked what Doran would do with the $10,000, he said he would fix his teeth, which,
Needed some fixing.
and did need a little fixing. And I did notice on the Facebook chat groups about it that he was actually in there joking about it himself. So we're not poking fun at him.
Hey.
We're just pointing out what he said on the show.
He said it on the show. He did a big grin, missing some front. It's all good.
The other note to point out was that there were some visible nipple polkage outage through the shirt. I wasn't the only one to notice it.
I didn't notice it.
And Doran himself even reposted a meme of him saying that forget forging, just use the nips to do the kill and the cutting tests.
Jeez. All right. Well, I'm glad he has a good sense of humor about all of it. So round 1, they had to make David Baker's favorite weapon, the Scottish Dirk. And it's a single edge blade with a false edge. Let's go 1/3 of the way into the spine. And needed to have a through tang.
And decorative file work.
Oh, and some decorative file work also. They were given, each person was given a big ball bearing of 52-100 steel, and it's a very difficult steel to work even in the press. It's just dense. It just doesn't really form that easily.
Plus, it's also harder to heat up a ball
yes,
bearing like that.
any large object takes longer to heat up.
Mm-hmm.
These challenges seem to be getting increasingly impossible.
Yeah. Well, they're giving them difficult
They-
steel in a difficult shape, and they have to make this blade that has all sorts of things going on.
And then he also said, Will even said, didn't he say on this one, it's like the final round weapon? Like when you go back to the home forges, he made a note of that. Like, this is a weapon you would normally make at your home forge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In round 4. And Dave Baker was in a kilt.
Yep. The
Though
whole time.
Was he, though? Because I could have sworn at first during round 1 he had been wearing pants, and then in round
Was
2...
It was round 2 that they show, and you
we
can
see
see
his
under the
legs,
table.
and all of a sudden you see that he has his legs in the kilt on.
Really?
Like, I feel like if you were to go back, and I'll try to find it and put it up on the screen
You're not mixing
here.
up episodes?
No, this is the first time that I've seen one with him
Okay.
doing a kilt, and I'm pretty sure he had pants on in the first shot and then kilt on in round 2.
Okay.
I'll check. If I'm wrong, you'll see it
Yeah.
up here. Who knows?
All right. And
Oh,
during
yeah.
this episode, you're on the floor.
So I was really sick yesterday while we were going through 2 of these episodes, this one and the previous one that we recorded, and I was most comfortable lying flat on the floor with my eyes closed and listening to the episode. And I heard Doran say something. I don't know what he said, but I had my eyes. I just goes, I don't like him.
And my response was, "He's your underdog."
I'm like, oh, damn it!
Yeah.
I was not in a good way yesterday. But anyway, moving forward.
Looks like John doesn't seem to like math too much.
Yeah, I wrote that one because of the third.
He was
Third,
like, well,
third.
the requirement was the third. And he's like, well,
It's more than a third.
it's more
if
than a third.
near
It's
half.
still good. So I was like, yeah, that's true. A third, half is more than a third. Good, good going. So, and then when it came to quenching, Ben goes for the quench, pulls it out, puts it on the anvil, takes his file, runs it across. It's biting. The blade is still pretty hot. The judges are saying, you can't file check it that early. It's still at like 900 degrees. You just pull it out of the oil. It's got to cool down before you do the file test on it.
Mm-hmm.
But he apparently doesn't know that, so he throws it back in the forge, gets it hot, goes for quench number 2, pulls it out, does an immediate file check, and the judges are again saying, what are you doing? You have to wait. But Ben doesn't know. Ben doesn't hear him. And so he goes back for a third quench. And I guess he waited long enough. He checks it, and I mean, I've never seen anyone go more than 3 quenches.
Yeah.
I think it's pretty much impossible at that point. Your blade's just not going to last. It's not going to make it. But he pulls it out, checks it. It's okay. He stops there. Then Dorn kind of went with the same thing. He quenched it pretty hot, pulled it out hot. It was still kind of glowing, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then he's like, well, he heats it up again. He goes for a second quench. And I don't know. He's done after that.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. Quenches are a pretty big problem with everyone on the show, apparently.
I guess just
as
a
we
lot
see.
lies in getting the quench just right. And if you don't do it right, like these guys were doing, it could really have some very bad consequences when you go to test it. But this is the first one I've seen where 2 contestants were so consistently just doing it wrong. Like Doran had the least amount of experience here, but I feel like that would be something you can probably pick up early on, is that you have to make sure that you quench
wait
it.
a minute.
Yeah, and then you wait.
Or from watching the show.
Yeah, that's
Okay,
true.
like when you see it every episode, that and the judges always talk about it. So I figure at this point, if you know about this show, you've seen a couple episodes, you should know by now. I know by now.
But when there's a timer, you panic.
That's probably
Can't
part
throw
of it.
all knowledge out the window. Though.
You
I mean,
can.
come on. But that's how it goes, and it makes part of the show work, because then now you have these problems with the blades. Is it too brittle now? Is it going to have cracks? Is it going to warp? Is it going to make it through the test? And this is all things judges consider when they go in and deliberate. So let's see. Phil had a warp in his tang
Mm-hmm.
when the judges were checking it out. No big deal, really. Ben had some cracks. Big surprise. Dorn, he didn't really have a typical point. It was more of a chopper point. This thing needed to be kind of come to a point, not just be a flat with the blade coming up. Jonathan had some surface cracking, and Ben got the boot. And so none of us picked Ben. So we did pretty good.
Yeah, we are getting better at
Yeah.
picking, as noted by Teresa. So for round 2, they had to add a handle, a brass guard, and a pommel cap. There wasn't a whole lot to note here. Phil, he was very precise, and he actually decided to go with the burn-through method, which the judges are not fond of, but a guy with 50 years of full-time experience, he soared through it. Like, he had the temperature perfect.
Yep.
He picked the right handle material so that he could very easily just insert it, and it went right in. It was almost like just hot knife into butter.
Exactly.
Sort of. It was just...
He used a vise instead
Yeah,
of just
he
like
used-
leaning on it.
And he had the gloves on while he was holding the blade part.
Yeah.
It was, everything about it was very well
And
done.
he does that all the time, he said. He's
Yeah.
like, I do burn-throughs all the time.
Yeah, so he knew what he was doing, and he accomplished what a good burn-through should look like. He pulled it off. Jonathan, his torch was not lighting properly. He just couldn't get it going. He had to go to a secondary torch to get
He
any
went
sort
with the
of
little
fire.
like plumber's map gas torch instead
Yeah.
of the big oxyacetylene. He couldn't figure out how to make that work. He hadn't used one since high school, he said. So the judges didn't really, they're like, you're not going to get the tang hot enough or the blade hot enough to fix that, but he made it kind of work somehow.
Yeah, he got it to work. But he also tried to put a pin in his handle by drilling through after the fact, and they were concerned that he didn't know exactly where the tang would be when he was drilling through it, and he was drilling down into it, and he was trying not to cut through the edge of it and possibly break the tang and weaken it.
Yeah.
And so he ended up ditching it altogether and just filling the hole back in with epoxy. And then Doran decided he was going to go with a framed tang where he basically traced the outline on his handle material and then used a grinding tool to grind out the profile for it. And I thought it looked pretty good, actually, the way that he put it together. Then he also, he fixed the point on his a little bit to make it more of a point and not as so much of a flatness. But then he also went and he did some decorative grinding along the handle too, which was actually nice looking. It was a very nice looking Dirk. Is that the Dirk that
Yep.
they were doing?
Yeah.
At the end. So overall, even though, there was some minor issues possibly with it, it still looked pretty good. And so the judging came down to the strength test, which was an oil can hammering, where Ben Abbott would just take a hammer to the top of this thing and punch it down through the top of an oil can. All of them passed the test without any major issues. For Phil, there was a little bit of minor roll. For Doran, he had some more noticeable rolling. And for Jonathan, his handle was not very comfortable. After that, they were then going through the sharpness test, which was the apple slice. So this was David Baker, where he has a metal guide that he kind of puts the knife on, and then he slides it across.
Like a dozen apples or something.
Yeah,
Like
like a dozen apples, and you see how cleanly it cuts through the apples. Phil and Jonathan cut through very nicely. There was maybe a little bit of minor issue with, I believe it was Jonathan's, where his had rolling, so it was like it kind of left a little edge, or maybe that was Phil's.
That was Phil's.
One of them had a
Yeah.
little bit of not the cleanest cut, but Doran's was just not a slicer at all. It was too much of a wedge shape, so that when David tried to slice through it, it got about partway through one of them and actually broke the apple, and then the rest of them it didn't even cut like through at all. It just kind of was bumped off. So unfortunately, Doran would not be getting his teeth this episode.
Yeah.
He was booted from round 2, and now we move on to the final round.
Round 3, then they go home to build the German Halberd, which is a combination axe, hook, and spike. It was used by Swiss armies during medieval era. It was used by foot soldiers against knights on horseback, where they would hook them from their horses to try to catch them and dismount them, and then kill with the spear or the axe.
So why is it called a German halberd if the Swiss armies were using it? And I thought that the Swiss were supposed to be neutral. Maybe that's more recent.
They are now, but
Yeah.
I think at the time,
Yeah, the more medieval times, I guess there was no neutrality at that point.
Yeah. And these are very tall weapons. The length of the shaft must be 6 feet from end to center junction. So they go home, and Jonathan becomes sick on his way home. So he's feeling ill the whole time. By day 4, Phil had taken his pieces. He was doing like a 4-piece and welding it together versus Jonathan was using one piece and kind of cutting it apart, stretching it out. By day 4, Phil's welding that stuff together. He's grinding it. It's looking great. Day 5, Jonathan is still forging with his coal forge. His propane one broke, right?
Oh, no, it wasn't big enough. And
that's
so
right.
he couldn't fit his...
Didn't fit.
Yeah.
But they both managed to get weapons together and back to the forge for the judging. The kill test was done by R.J. Markida this time.
Mm-hmm.
And with the ballistics dummy, they had a thrust, hack, and attempt to dismount kill test, which they both passed.
Now, I would just like to say I'm going to go on change.org and start a petition that they need to have a separate camera on Doug during this test at all times so that he's in focus and it's a nice clear shot of his face. If he's not the one doing the kill test, there needs to be a shot of his face.
I want to see him, even if it's not a kill test, right? Just any other like
during
strength
the other
test.
tests?
He should be like picture-in-picture style
I'm
on
just thinking
the
little
screen.
square somewhere.
Yeah,
with
at
Doug.
all times, just Doug Marcade's face.
Doug cam.
Just the Doug cam. That's perfect. So look for that on change.org. Please, history, add the Doug cam to Forged in Fire.
But it's so genuine with him in the back, where it's like he's not the focus, so he could just enjoy.
Well,
what's
don't tell him
happening.
about it.
Okay.
Doug, don't listen. Don't watch this episode.
All right, so then they had the strength test, which was chopping corrugated steel. Phil's did great. Jonathan's passed, but there was a bit of a bend in the axe blade, which affected his ability to cut the fish in the sharpness test. So both of them fully cut through the fish 3 out of 4 times. But Jonathan's was more difficult to use, and Dave Baker had to really focus on trying to cut from a particular part of the axe blade. And for that reason, Jonathan was eliminated and Phil wins.
Which means that Teresa got the underdog pick and Sean, his main pick, was the winner, Phil, with 50 years experience.
Good job, Phil.
And we forgot to mention at the beginning of the episode when we were doing our picks and I was lying on the ground with my eyes closed, Teresa made me not look at any of the people and only listen to the amount of experience and then the like initial introductions, and that's how I made my picks. And it was another inadvertent beard bro pick when I picked Jonathan.
Yes.
And Jonathan, when he did come in for that last test, like every time you saw him prior to that, he had a hat on, and then he came in with these long, flowing, gorgeous locks that were just like Fabio walking into there.
Yeah.
It was amazing.
So we were trying to control for the beard bro this time, but then 3 out of 4 of them had beards.
Yeah.
So maybe next time we'll try again.
Yeah.
Try again. I'll do it blindfolded or eyes closed or something. But anyway, it was a good episode. Season 5, episode 10, German Halberd. Please like this video. Please subscribe to our channel if you like these wrap-ups. Please leave us a comment or some love below in the comment section. And thank you for watching. We'll catch you on the next one.
Like that. Yeah, my Markida. The Dougie.
The